Well, Frankie, I want to thank you first off for coming today and agreeing to have a sit down with me. We go way back. We went to high school together. You were probably a year ahead of me in high school. But more recent, the last 10, 11 years, you were very instrumental in me coming to faith when kind of life hit me pretty hard. And we played in a golf league together, I believe.
Yeah.
And you would every once in a while talk about Christ to me as I'm hitting a golf shot. It was somewhat annoying. And then it became like, oh my gosh, it was a divine appointment. Mm-hmm. And really, where I'm at today has a lot to do with your influence, in my life. So it is an honor to talk about a hard issue today. We're going to talk about in a few minutes about politics, and we live in a world right now in a country that's very divided, racially, religiously, and also politically. We're going to talk a little bit about how can we, as followers of Christ, operate in this world honorably. Mm-hmm. But before we start in some questions, I'd just like to have you share a little bit about who you are, kind of your background.
Well, Chad, like you said, we grew up together here in the district. Tecumseh Arrows, go Arrows. Raised my family here, but going through, there wasn't a whole lot of diversity other than what I seen in this community. Didn't do real great in high school, had a lot of fun, but so then said, let's try this military thing out, because college, I'm just not quite cut out for college yet. Mm-hmm. So went to the military, and really my eyes opened up to diversity, and just different cultures, different people, different opinions, different ideas. And really to survive and navigate through all those waters, I had to be somewhat careful and not so opinionated. I had to do a lot more listening than talking. And so I think that served me pretty well. Finished with the military, and also received became a registered nurse. St. Clair Community College, started off there, and then ended up getting my bachelor's and my master's. So I am now the director of nursing at the Ohio State University. Yeah. Yes. And so it's been a fun ride. I can remember golfing with you and speaking about Christ, and not necessarily, hopefully it wasn't too annoying, because I was trying to be careful about not pushing you away. It's like, hey, I can go out and I can drink a beer and play on the golf course and have a good time with the guys, but still be able to be faithful in my walk with Christ, and hopefully be a positive influence in somebody's life. So it's meaningful to hear that, and touching, because God has puts us in front of everybody, right? And so you always have to be careful of how you're influencing, either bad or to the negative or to the positive. And those are things that I consciously think about a lot, when I purposely think about when I'm with others.
Yeah. I kind of said tongue in cheek that you were kind of annoying talking about Christ, but you really were very careful, and it was never pushy. It was, matter of fact, it was done the way it should be done. We had a relationship first. There was we were friends. You cared about me, which I think is always important when it comes to sharing faith with anybody. Anyways, is people want to know that you care about them first. Yeah. And then it can come when they feel like you care about them, that there's a relationship, there's some trust there. Then those kind of conversations, happen a lot easier.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I think it is, and like I said, when I came to faith, you were one of the first people I called. Hey, listen, life's hard right now. I don't get life. I need some help.
Yeah.
So you were there.
Then you've been on fire ever since, man. I'm trying to keep up, but I just...
It's been a journey, man. It's been a journey. It's if you told me 10 years ago I was going to be a pastor, I'd say you're out of your mind. Yeah. There's no way I'm going to do this.
I tell you what, when I listen to you on Sundays, I think about that too, because even we were one-on-one at times. I mean, you stuttered, you're a little fast with your words. Mm-hmm. When you're on the stage and you're so powerful and so clear, it's like, oh man, completely reformed through Christ.
Must be a God thing.
It's been fun.
Yeah. One of the things you learn is, in my weakness, He is made strong.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm encouraged by Paul, because I think Paul had a speech impediment as well. Mm-hmm. And, he struggled with his words, and yet, through the power of the Holy Spirit, we have church today because of the Apostle Paul.
Yeah.
So it's been a pretty cool thing, man. But most definitely props to you, kudos to you. I know you're a humble guy, and I know you're not going to take all the credit for that. But God does use people who are faithful.
And speaking of Paul, so Paul was so Jesus definitely, but Paul was also an influence over Tom Burke's life. Tom Burke's the one who really was instrumental in leading me to Christ, and he used the same kind of approach of developing relationships first, and then being careful how you bring up those subjects. And I think that goes into politics too.
It does.
Because that's the same kind of approach I think I like to use, because it's tough. It's tough. You don't want to push people away. You still want to maintain relationships. And to be honest with you, I don't even get on Facebook anymore, because it's so difficult out there just to see the emotion. It's such an emotional antagonist is politics. And
it's so divisive, isn't it? It really is. You know, it's interesting. My grandpa once told me, he goes, you can talk about two things to people: religion and politics.
Yeah.
There's so much hatred, there's so much tension that goes on with that. But, yet Jesus didn't shy away from, operating in the world in which we live, and it's a great segue into our conversation. We're in this series called This Is Us, and the idea that Jesus is a reconciler. He reconciles all things, and we do live in a nation that is divided, racially, politically, religiously. And we really want to talk about, how do we, as followers, how do we navigate, through these difficult topics? Like you, I was raised in New Carlisle. I live in Tip City, pretty much, white suburbia, mostly conservative in their belief patterns. I was raised in a very conservative, home, and so my experiences in life have been somewhat one-sided. You being raised the same way I was raised for the most part, but then you got to experience life a little differently. I think your views have probably changed over time, or have solidified what you really believe. It's amazing when you get to meet someone who doesn't think like you, doesn't believe like you, doesn't look like you, and you get to know them. It really kind of changes your perspective of life. So going into politics, the one thing I get frustrated with, Frank, is the high emotionalism that is tied, to politics. And Facebook is a great example. You see all these rants and raves, and I've seen people unfriend other people who are friends of theirs, who are fellow believers, unfriend them because they don't share the same belief system, or they say something that just sets them off. And, there's a danger to a high emotionalism. I don't think emotions can be completely detached from our belief system, but it seems like emotionalism is trumped, rational thoughts. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it does. To the Facebook thing, to a point. When I get into discussions, we used to be able to have discussions, maybe be on two different sides of the world, but then have some kind of compromise. You know what? I walked a mile through this person's shoes now after a conversation with them. I kind of get where they're coming from. I don't believe in 100% of what they believe in, but I can still coexist. Nowadays, it's a little different. It feels like there has to be a winner and there has to be a loser. And so everything we get into, it's like I have to win this conversation because there is no compromise. I remember on Facebook just seeing all this stuff going out, and it really... I try not to comment on much of any of the political stuff I see, but there was some stuff that were really cutting me hard, especially thinking about life experiences and my personal faith belief. It didn't feel like there was a lot of love being shown, and I think a lot of times we miss that love. And so looking back, I responded to a few of these, and I'm weak as anybody else. I fail, but I responded a few times, not to try to prove that what they thought was wrong, but just to say, hey, here's the other side of the coin, maybe consider this. And I just kept getting these irrational, emotional responses from people. And I tried to explain again, hey, I appreciate that, but not that you're wrong, but consider this view just for a second. But people can't, and they really couldn't, not through at least the social media venue. I think it can be a little easier one-on-one conversation here to be able to kind of discuss and have that great in-depth conversation. And we've done it several times. In fact, when I think about some of the best conversations I had, religion and politics, who both your grandfather said we shouldn't talk about, having them with you have always been kind of enlightening, because I can see, okay, this is why some people get to this, and I feel like it's mutual. You say, oh wow, I see why Frank's coming from this perspective, and when you have that give and take, it's easy to compromise. But when people get closed down, it's hurtful. So I go back. I stopped using social media. I mean, I still have an account out there. Every now and then I'll kind of just surf through to see if there's something going on, just to see what people are up to. But whenever it's political, I stay away from that, at least on social media. I just feel that I haven't found any good out of that yet. I know I'm not trying to sway people from their beliefs, but I also know that people are not appreciating anything I'm saying.
It's hard. It's hard to see it sometimes. And you see it on, I mean, I've watched people post something, and I've seen the train wreck that follows.
Yeah.
People who are good friends just have this hatred towards one another. It's like, you guys, take a deep breath. When I was going through my master's, I had a professor that was really, he's very involved in politics, and very, very influential in my life, not politically, but for my development spiritually. But he said something that really spoke to me. I think applies to politics as well. He talked about faith. He goes, the moment you put a period at the end of your faith statements, you're done growing. You close down, you're not open anymore. Like, I believe this, period. He goes, listen, I believe this, ... And I'm always continuing to be open. He goes, my theology has changed so much in the last 20 years. And I'm going to tell you, my theology has changed in the last 10. And the more I study, the more I learn, the less I know. But the things I do know, I'm more certain about. And I think about politics is kind of the same way. I mean, I have a belief system, but I like to think it's ... And when we have that ... you really are more open to conversation.
Yeah.
It's not about, I'm trying to win this argument. It's like you said, it's winners or losers. And it's like, that's really challenging for me. Like, I want to have a real intellectual conversation about why you think what you believe, is important. Why are you believing that? Why did you get to that? How did you get to that conclusion versus, oftentimes when someone's talking to us, we're so closed up. We're already thinking about how we're going to respond that we don't even listen to someone talk, and it is so frustrating. The politics has played an important role since the beginning of the United States, being created, and so and you look at the the evangelical population, it's huge voting power. You'll see both sides of the parties really kind of cater to the evangelicals. How important is politics to us, or how important should it be to us?
I just, from my own perspective, right, I think it's vital that we're involved in politics. But again, I think it comes out of my profession. Politics aside, just my profession. When you look at the issues that affect people every day, and especially in my line as being a nurse, a registered nurse for the most vulnerable population, which is mental health, and how politics can really affect outcomes. And so being able to be involved in that and have a voice, and having professional organizations that can come together, and it's important that you rally people around. It's not easy being a politician. Politicians have to make laws over a whole group of people that are just as diverse as anybody, and not just here in Tecumseh area, but people in Dayton. This is a diverse state, and how are they going to set laws that kind of affect all of us? So there are some people who are not going to be happy, but that's where that compromise has to come in, and you have to have. It's like the art of the win-win is gone. No one does the win-win anymore. Now it goes back to win-lose, and how do you get to that point? And that point comes to diversity of ideas and people coming together, having conversations, and being able to come around. And so when you have more voices, it's easier to sway things. So I see why the government wants to court groups, the religious group, because that's a lot of votes out there to get. So you kind of want to know where the religious sect is, and what are we going to do to help get our votes up for that. So it's vital that we have voices. but it's also vital that we're paying attention to everybody and not maybe just our own sometimes closed-minded ideas.
Yeah, that's good. With our last election, there's been this really kind of a cry out for fake news, and you got your different news outlets that are bent one way or the other, and honestly, what I found very challenging is how do we get informed? How do we become informed about what makes the most sense? And you hear, I've seen on both sides. They're very heavy biased on what they're trying to talk about, and I get it. I get it. They're trying to win the election and doing that. But then you look at, how do we decipher what's real, what's true, and what's just manipulation and emotionalism? They're trying to strike a chord with us.
Yeah. I think the first rule of thumb should be if you're getting your news through social media, you should stop. Not a good place. But you're right, the news centers. And let me go back to how this, not just how we have to get to a point of understanding how to get the news media out, but also the effect this news has on us. I'm going to be honest with you. I was in a dark time, especially during the election, because the news cycle, I lived it and breathed it. I woke up. My prayer life suffered because I couldn't. I cut my prayer life out to turn on the news and figure out what was going on next. And behavior scientists will tell you, for every negative thing you hear, you have to replace that with 3 positives. Wow. That is way out of balance. When I wake up and I have an hour drive to Columbus, and I'm hearing the news, and I'm guilty as anybody else, the news media I listen to, it's all negative, 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 negative. And then by the time I get to work, I'm in such a bad place. I've had no prayer life going into the work. Then I heard negative, negative, negative. And then somebody comes up and asks me a question. I'm just all irritable and ready to go. It's like, oh, man. I started recognizing that. Sheila's like, you need to back off of the news. But it's just that constant cycle of what's next. So you have to put that in perspective. When I actually kind of stopped listening to the news, limited myself 15, 20 minutes a day, because you can get what you want to get in 20 minutes. It's those people like my father who would listen to the news from the time he woke up to the time he went to bed. And man, going to his house and talk politics after that was just intense, man.
My dad's the same way.
Oh, so if you could limit that in, but then I think when you're looking at issues, you got to think about who it affects and how it affects others. You can hear what the news believes, but then you got to do some kind of self-looking into what's happening. What's it mean to me? What's it mean to my belief system? What's it mean to friends? And I think that's where you have to have those conversations. If you can't get into a conversation like this and discuss topics and issues, you're never going to be able to understand what the other side is coming from to really help truly inform your decision. And so that's where you have to be, just having those conversations. It's not easy nowadays. It's not.
One of the approaches that we want to take is and I see this also in religion, and I know we're focusing more on politics today, but I need to convert someone. And it seems like it's, for Christians especially, it's like us versus the world, and we try to go in there and we want to convert this person. You got to believe a certain way. You got to believe this way, and we kind of plow through people in the process of doing that. And you kind of see that with politics, especially in the political world. We become more of an issues-driven. It seems like Christians, especially, like it's more about what we're against than what we're for. You really see that happening an awful lot. And matter of fact, the church has gotten kind of that kind of stigma, in the Western world. Like we're all about, well, we're against this, we're against that, we're against this. And what we stand for is pretty awesome. The gospel is incredible. The good news of Jesus is, the people he ate with, the people he talked to, and yet we talk about what we're against. How do we, as followers of Christ, how do we bridge the gap between people on different sides, of the spectrum when it comes politically. How do we bridge the gap? How can we take a step forward? Because I look at Jesus, and the 12 disciples that he calls to come together. I mean, they were on both sides of the spectrum politically. Matthew's a tax collector. He represented Rome. The Jews hated Rome. And you have Peter and you have John and Andrew who represent the Jewish community, and Jesus brings them together to for the ultimate mission. How do we do that? As believers, I mean, I got to believe that we have we're empowered to change, make a change. Be the change that we need to be. How do we do that?
That's a great question, and in fact, that's why I come to church every Sunday. To hopefully, you guys would give me that answer. But so let me see if I can do it. I think it is. It starts with Jesus. It starts with redemption. It starts with mercy and grace. And those are the things I always think about. There's a lot of people that we kind of ostracize in the church. There's a lot of people that want Christ, but feel like they're not worthy of Christ. There's a lot of people walking around with labels. We just went through the sermon series about having labels, right? What's my label? And there's a lot of people who feel like they're not even welcomed in the church because they have a label. It could be not just maybe their sexual orientation, their gender orientation, where they stand on politics, what they've done in their past. Maybe it's as simple as they told a lie last week. I mean, it's who's rating the sin, but somehow it's being translated that certain sins are not allowed in the church. And I don't know how we've ever got there as a society, but we need to open our arms back up and show some love. It all goes back to love. And if we can show love to one another, we can accept people. We're not saying their actions are right, but we can say, hey, God loves you and there's a place in heaven for you. Come in the church and let's talk about it. And let's just see where God leads you. I mean, there's a huge, I hate to say it, I still cuss. I'm hoping I still get that ticket to heaven, but there's other people who still sin, right? And they still sin, and I'm hoping that the biggest thing is knowing Christ our Savior, and after that, love one another.
Yeah.
All these politics, who cares where you land on that?
Yeah.
Let's just love one another so that we can get through this together, and I think that's how we'll bring people together. But we have to have welcoming arms. We have to have church doors that are open up to everybody, and when people come in, we have to embrace all. And if we can do that and start sharing that love, I think that will translate into then maybe living like Jesus and being able to bring all these different diverse people in together to say, hey, we can have a win-win situation, and Christ is it.
I love that. You should be a preacher. If your job doesn't work out for you at the Ohio State University,
Ohio State.
you can definitely. I'm sure you could do well in the ministry. That's when someone doesn't look like us, someone doesn't believe like us, doesn't act like us, it makes us uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And I see this politically as well. Like when someone is on the opposite spectrum and they don't think like I think, when we don't understand them, we start to criticize.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have a chance to be open and talk to them, we condemn. We point to fingers, and you see that across the board on all these different things.
Mm-hmm.
From faith to politics to race even as well. It is hard. I mean, the fallen nature of humanity. We do bring a sin condition
Mm-hmm.
to the table. But I think what you say is so wise, that being open. I mean, that's the hard part. I think people think when they're talking to someone who doesn't look like them or believe like them, then you're afraid that people might think you think the same way they do.
Mm-hmm.
I think we get so wrapped up in how we look, our image.
Yeah. And I think any differences, even at my work now, It goes to generational differences. So the baby boomers thought less of the Gen Xers. The Gen Xers said, now we can't stand the millennials. The millennials, who knows what it is for them. But the next generation is never as good as the last generation. And so it's the same thing with race, with gender, you name it. There's differences. I think a lot of thing that drives this is not just the difference, but the fear it creates in ourselves, right? There's somebody different. I don't know how to understand that person. And the fear of losing some power, there's a power loss, a power shift with, if I give up my beliefs, if I give up who I am, I could lose some power. But it's not us who has the power, right? If we give it to Christ, who cares who has the power?
Exactly.
But we don't, a lot of times we don't have that faith to give that. We have to control it. And if we can get past controlling that, I think it can be healthy.
That's really good. That's really good. I think about Paul says, I was a Gentile to the Gentiles, I was a Jew to the Jew, I was all people to all different kinds of people, I think what I'm hearing you say, I think I really agree with this, is that our approach to politics is always through the lens of the gospel, right? We can probably agree. We're probably on different sides.
Completely different tickets.
Probably. And I'd say we're probably all the things that we overlap on that we most definitely agree on. And yet, at the end of the day, it's the gospel. That's what really motivates and drives us, not what party we're a part of, if you're liberal, conservative, Democrat, Republican, but it's our identity in Christ.
But I think it also goes back to love of the gospel, right? And that huge kind of concept, because just last week, one side threw out gospel to support an issue, and the other side threw out this other gospel to support the same issue.
I know.
And so we have to be careful how we just throw the gospel around. And I do think if it just goes all back to love one another. If we were in Congress together, we would be on opposite sides of the table, but I bet you, me and you could develop a bill that we could both agree on, that we could submit, and that it would be wide support. I think we could do that.
You're right.
So, when you are ready to retire from the gospel, let me know, and we'll try and run on a ticket together.
I don't think so. I don't think so. That's a messy world. I don't want to be. Living in church world is very messy.
Oh yeah.
It's a different kind of mess, though.
Yeah,
it's a different kind of mess. People really are seeking hope, and they're seeking salvation. And this really is. I think it's really important that we understand that you're right. The gospel, scripture. There was a time where people justified slavery through scripture.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And I think we have to be careful. Again, I go back to the dots, and another thing that someone said to me too when I was in school that still really speaks to me, actually it was an undergrad, it was a philosophy class. I'm sorry, Wes, I don't like philosophy. But it was, he asked the question, why do you believe what you believe? And I think that holds true for politics too, right? How important is it why do we believe what we believe? Can you explain that a little bit more, or unpack that a bit more? Why it's important?
That's where the emotion comes from, because we get so tied in. It becomes who you are, and you believe what you believe through the life experiences you've had. I try to tie this a little bit to what I see with the drug epidemic. People will look at people who are on drugs in this big heroin epidemic, and we'll say they are morally weak. Look at them, they're morally weak. And we look down at them, and we're like, people who are doing drugs are not morally weak, right? They've had experiences in their life that brought them to where they are now, that the only thing they can replace the hurt with, because they don't many times have Christ, is drugs. And for us to look down at them, we're cutting them off from being able to come back into Christ, because we're so judgmental. We say they're morally weak. So when you look at politics and you look at why do you believe what you believe, everything I am up to this point is because of my life experiences. And if you're coming to tell me I shouldn't believe that, who am I to believe that? I'm like, who are you to discount my whole life's work? And and there are things that you just won't ever be able to experience. Just like many of my experiences are also because of the field I work in, and especially the LGBT community. You look at people who identify certain ways, and if we're casting stones, looking down at them, we're tearing down who they have built up their whole life. We have people who won't even come into the hospital because they're afraid of the lack of care they might receive, just because of how people might see how they identify. And that is hurtful, because we're destroying people's lives by, again, going back to the point of proving I'm right and you're wrong, versus showing love, embracing people, and saying Christ is for everybody. We can come in together, we can learn together, and there is a lot of things I've learned from different cultures, from different people, that has just opened up my eyes to being like, man, this is why I believe a certain way, and who I am, and just that's the best way I could answer.
Yeah, it's
that.
really good, man. Golly, it's challenging. It's convicting to me. And I preached a couple of weeks ago on failure, and I talked about just my shortcomings, and the shortcomings really opened the door to receive God's grace. When we screw up, or when things aren't right in our life, we want grace. And when someone else screws up, we want to give truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's not really what Jesus was trying to communicate, is you receive grace, go give grace.
Yeah.
And we have to get past the idea that just because someone doesn't look like us, act like us, think like us, we can sit down and have a rational conversation with that person. We can have an open conversation with that person. And it doesn't change my identity in Christ.
Right.
I don't have to worry about what people think. Oh my gosh, you're talking to that person. Or, oh my gosh, did you see Chad the other day talking to he's hanging out with this person.
Yeah.
When people say you need to be more like Jesus, he hung out with tax collectors, prostitutes. He threw one heck of a fish fry. Made top shelf wine. So I'm like, maybe I should go get some wine and go downtown and hang out with some prostitutes. That's what Jesus did.
Right.
But the point of that is that we have to be open, because everybody we come in contact with has been created in the image of God, and Christ has died for them. And Jesus loves them just as much as they love me.
Yes.
I'm not any better.
No.
Matter of fact, because of the grace I got, I'm not.
Yeah.
Exactly. If I'm, going to be honest about it.
Yeah.
If you knew my thoughts, you'd be like, you sure you're a pastor?
Yeah.
So it really is challenging, and the gospel is the answer. When we really look at Jesus sums up the gospel in basically two little sentences. Love God, love people. Matter of fact, in John he says, a new command I give you. A new command, love one another. It's not a new command. You see that in the Old Testament, but he was reiterating the fact this is the game changer. This is how we can bridge the gap, racially, religiously, politically. We've said that throughout our conversation here today. So. ... You got any final thoughts? Any questions? Any?
No, thanks for having me. I love these discussions. We should do it more often.
Yeah.
It's fun talking with you.
I would hope someday the church would be able to tackle some of the hard issues with grace. Have a real conversation about it.
Yeah. Not
be so obtuse, so closed-minded. And really go back into the life of Jesus. And it really, I know this is kind of, we hear this all the time, there's bands made it all the time. What would Jesus do? I've got friends who are, from the gay community, good friends of mine, they love Jesus, and they are not welcomed in their gay community because they're Christian, and they're not welcome in the church because they're gay. And then you look at that and go, man, what would Jesus do in that situation?
Yeah, and that's why I love Restoration Park Church, because we do open our arms to everybody.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, we have a very diverse population out there, and
we do.
and I think you guys do a great job on walking that line without offending, turning off people who need to hear the gospel. And I say not people as in any one person, because everybody needs to hear it. I need to hear it.
Yes.
Just as you're careful not to turn me off from Christ, where you got to be just as careful not to turn other people's off from the message we're hearing. And so, and you, Wes, and Randy all do just a phenomenal job at that. And that's what brings me back every Sunday. And
Thanks, man.
it's been fun. And when there are slip ups, you guys are open to receiving. Hey, you know what? I remember talking to Randy one day. He was like, "Thanks for bringing that to my attention." He goes, "I do appreciate it," and it is when you can bring kind of the other side of it without beating people down. You know, that's when people are open to learning and accepting versus condemning.
It's relational, man.
It is,
and I think politics need to be relational as well too.
Yep, without a doubt.
I think if we could be relational, I think we can agree to disagree on topics,
Mm-hmm.
but we can be open and having a real discussion, a real conversation, where it's not we're trying to see who has the better argument or who wins. But
Right.
really, I think the win in politics and conversation is you show love, you show respect. I think you honor God by doing those
Mm-hmm.
things. You don't have to walk away to changed minds, a
No.
changed perspective,
No,
but a greater understanding for your brother or sister.
that's it. That's beautifully said.
You know,
That's what it's about.
and if you can have that,
Mhm.
I think we can change the divide that we have
Yeah.
in our world politically. So
I agree.
great, man. Thanks for coming today, man.
Hey,
This was
thank you.
awesome. You give me a big hug, man.
Yeah, thank you. Nice talking to you.
You too, man. You too.